Former South Africa captain AB de Villiers had surprised many when, in a recent interview, he said that Gautam Gambhir, the current India head coach, is a very emotional cricketer, or at least was a very emotional cricketer, and having an emotional person as the team's head coach may not always be one of the best things out there. And whilst it was something that surprised many in terms of the frankness of his assessment, it did lead to people trying and finding out previous other such statements, and one of them has come to light and has absolutely been going viral, and it is courtesy of India's former mental conditioning coach Paddy Upton. Now, Upton did a lot of good work with the Indian team and is credited as one of the key behind the scenes people during their run to the ICC World Cup in 2011, and his assessment of Gambhir was very interesting to say the least. In fact, that assessment came about in his book, and the way he wrote it, it painted a fascinating picture of a man consistently at battle with his own demons and insecurities. In fact, Upton said something that till date is something that was mentioned a lot and now has been going viral even more than ever. Let's take a look at some of those quotes. He said that Gautam Gambhir was perhaps one of the weakest and mentally most insecure cricketers I worked with. He was constantly battling his inner world and questioning himself. Now, that's a pretty brutal assessment, because he said straight up that perhaps one of the weakest and mentally most insecure cricketers. There's no nice way of putting that, but Upton is known to be a frank man, and if you think this is seen as something of an insult, it's not. He basically described the mental makings of a man who was a gritty character, but one who, as he said, consistently battled his inner demons. He expands on this further by saying, but his ability to perform under pressure, often during India's toughest overseas tours, showed how extraordinary his competitive spirit was. And in fact, Upton gives an example of that, saying that Gambhir, when he got to 150, and if he got out anywhere between 150 to 200, you'd be kicking himself saying why it is he couldn't get 200. That typifies not only, as he says, the mental demons that he would be battling, but also the competitive cricket that he possessed. And as he points out, how extraordinary his competitive spirit was, that he often ended up getting big runs for India in pressure situations and during overseas tours. In fact, he expands further on this point and says that I did some of my best and also some of my most ineffective work or mental conditioning work with Gambhir. He could be unreachable one day and incredibly receptive the next. And truth be told, this is something, if you ask a lot of people who work within the mental health realm, will tell you about people who are deeply insecure or who have a deep sense of insecurity. Gambhir seemingly being one of those people, is that they can often very well be very, very approachable and very receptive to new ideas one day, and on other days, they'll just be stuck in their zone and refusing to actually entertain anything new. And that's exactly the picture that Upton is painting of Gambhir. Very interestingly, by the way, if you think that these kind of quotes could ruffle really the feathers of anyone, and truth be told, if you're hearing, it won't be nice to hear that, you know, so-and-so is one of the most mentally weak cricketers I've worked with. Gambhir, when these quotes ended up making their way to him, issued a statement, or is said may have had a public response, but it wasn't negative at all. In fact, this is what he had to say. He said that my insecurities as a cricketer are well documented. Paddy Upton is a good man, and there is nothing he wrote with any wrong intentions. I mean, wow, that's one really classy response. Gambhir says very clearly that no, there was nothing wrong, there were no wrong intentions in what he said. More importantly, what he said, there was nothing wrong whatsoever. I was insecure as a cricketer, but I used that insecurity to fuel myself, and that's what people with insecurities tend to end up doing more often than not. They will overcompensate, make up for it, and actually end up being better than they would have been if they had been less insecure and more confident. So it's an interesting sort of a dichotomy. And as I said, these quotes have been going viral. They do showcase Gambhir the man, but whether or not those insecurities can now fuel Gambhir the head coach and potentially see a turnaround to a coaching tenure that has reaped rewards in white ball cricket but had very mixed or poor returns in test cricket, something that remains to be seen. One thing is for sure, if Gambhir does get the chance, it would be foolish to write him off, although the start admittedly hasn't been great. But what are your thoughts on what it is that Upton had to say on Gambhir? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget as always to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, follow us also on social media. We're on Instagram, X and Facebook, and stay tuned for more such updates from the world of sport.